the first thing I'd highlight is, every year for the past 10 years, even though the US dollar has been pretty strong, the US dollar share of international reserve has basically been shrinking every year. And today I think we're down to 57%. We're sort of losing 1% a year, so it gradually gets eroded. But it doesn't mean it disappears overnight. The way I think of reserve currencies is a little bit like computer systems. Rajeev, I'm going to assume, well, you're most likely on Microsoft. And the reason you're using Microsoft as an operating system is that everybody else uses Microsoft. So in your firm, when you hire somebody new, you can just assume that he comes in and he knows how to use PowerPoint and he knows how to use Excel. You give him his computer and off he goes. And also, if you and I want to share a financial model, you can email me the Excel. We're all on the same system. And currencies are the same thing. The reason most people use the US dollar is not because they love the United States. The reason India buys its oil in US dollars from Saudi Arabia is not because India is such a huge fan of the US, but it's because everybody else does it. Now, this means that to replace the US dollar as a reserve currency, if we use this Microsoft analogy, you can't come up with something that's like roughly the same or marginally better. You need to be massively better, right? For you to, like, if I come to you with an operating system that's like, hey, look, it's almost as good as Microsoft, you're going to say, yeah, no interest. Thank you very much. You're like, why am I going to go through the hassle of changing my whole IT infrastructure? And so, there's an embedded advantage to being the legacy reserve currency. Having said that, you could say that somebody has managed to challenge Microsoft, and that somebody, of course, has been Apple, right? If you walk into an architect's firm today, if you walk into a newspaper editing room, etc., chances are it will be on Apple. And where Apple was especially successful is actually, if you go back to 2006, 2007, Apple was trading at 7-8 times earnings. And most investors thought, yeah, Apple, it's a nice stock. They produce some nice gadgets. But the reality is, Apple will never be able to compete for the IT spend at Goldman Sachs, or for the IT budget at Walmart, or for the IT budget at Volkswagen. Microsoft will always own that. And that was true. Apple did something that was quite bright. They basically said, you know what, we're not even going to try to compete for the IT budget at Walmart. Instead, we're going to create another operating system, a parallel operating system, and we're going to go straight to the consumer. So they create iOS, they create the smartphone, they create the iPad, and they basically target the high-end consumer in the Western world and in the emerging markets. And they basically bypass the IT department, right? And in so doing, they actually leapfrogged Microsoft. Not that Microsoft disappeared, not that Microsoft imploded. Microsoft is still around, it's doing fine, but it nonetheless got leapfrogged by Apple. Why do I highlight this? Well, because that's exactly what China's doing on the currency front. China, over the next year and a half, is going to be launching the digital renminbi, which in essence is a parallel infrastructure. It's like a parallel operating system to the US dollar that is bypassing what would be the corporate IT budgets, i.e. the banks, the corporate IT departments, i.e. the banks, and going straight to the consumer. The pitch that China will make is basically, you're an entrepreneur in Indonesia, you go to Singapore, why don't you just pay your taxi, your hotel, your food, your restaurant, whatever else, with your Alipay, with your WePay. It settles automatically in digital renminbi, frictionless, no cost, and no exchange rates, and it's all very clean. And now you could say, well, the entrepreneur in Indonesia won't want to do that because now all of a sudden the Chinese government will know, where he spends his money, how he spends his money, etc. And 10 years ago, I would have believed that. I would have said, who wants the Chinese Communist Party to know where they're spending their money? But I think the big lesson of the past 10 years is that people will give up privacy for convenience every day of the week. This, we see it with people putting Alexas in their home, right? With using Google browsers, etc. People have, the past 10 years have taught us, using Facebook, past 10 years have taught us people time and time again will give up privacy if you offer them convenience. Now, the digital renminbi will have one massive advantage, and that is that, once China decides to roll it out in earnest, it'll have a billion users in the first 6 months. Now, if you look at, I'm sure you've seen these charts of, how many years it took for a billion people to have a fax machine, and a billion people to have a telephone, and a billion people to have a TV. I think it took like 50 years for a billion people to have a TV, and 30 years for a billion people to have a telephone, etc. It took 6 years for Facebook to have 500 million users, and it took another 2, so 8 years total for Facebook to have a billion users. Here China is probably going to go from 0 users to a billion users of its digital currency in 6 to 9 months. It will be, the fastest billion ever. And so this will most likely change the global financial landscape in a way that I think most people are completely underestimating today.